All right, cool. Excited to get rolling. I think we're good to go now. Shreyas and Kevin, if you guys just want to give quick intros for people who might not know who you are, what you're all about.
Yes, I'm the founder of Llama, which helps DAOs and DeFi protocols manage their treasury. We basically help DAOs through problems relating to asset allocation, budgeting / spending, and reporting. And we've worked with a bunch of DAOs, including Uniswap, Aave, FWB. We're working a little bit with Forefront and Gitcoin as well. So, and we also have a reporting product, and Keevan's really been doing some great work on the reporting side. And, we'd want to build out sort of a, kind of an SEC Edgar, but on chain across DAOs that you could see sort of real-time financial statements across different DAO treasuries. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'll just give it to Keevan.
Hey everyone, I'm Kevin. I'm a certified public accountant, a CPA in the US. Well, back up, I just want to thank Jihad and Forefront and Shreyas to invite me to this. This is really exciting. So yeah, my background is financial reporting and accounting, and I'll go more into detail about what that is. But I have about 8 years in that in traditional accounting, so doing accounting for technology startups and working with VC firms and other investors with their portfolio companies to prepare these financial reports so that startups can raise their next round. So been doing that for a while and got into blockchain around 2017. And now I'm doing DAO Treasury reporting with Llama. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome, appreciate that, y'all. You guys touched on this a bit, but I'd love to hear a bit more about how you came across the DAO Treasury space. Why was this something that interested you enough to kind of specialize in? And what did that process look like for you?
Yeah, for me, I actually responded to a forum post by Brian Flynn when he was running the social token called Jam. And I saw this post where he was looking for someone to help with manage Jam's treasury. And I was looking for ways to get involved, honestly, full-time in crypto. I was still dabbling in various things, and I just left my full-time job and I was itching to do something. And when I saw this post, I said, okay, I think I know something relating to, managing pools of money, but I still am new to how to do this well. So I reached out to a bunch of people actually who, were in charge of actually managing larger treasuries for DeFi protocols or other sort of large foundations in crypto. And one thing I realized was that, basically, there wasn't much thought and tooling in the space, and it was very early days. I was searching for answers to questions I had, but then I figured out that, I probably had more thoughts and could add some value to the space. So I decided to build something initially for the ETH Global Hackathon to a basic budgeting tool and reporting tool for treasuries, and then that got some interest from Meta Cartel and a few other DAOs, and then going from there, I got some help to build it up more, and realized that the problem actually at the moment is also has to do with services. So it's one thing for tooling to exist, but people actually need help with deciding how to manage these pools of assets, whether it's asset allocation or budgeting or spending, and reporting as well. You can't just sort of have these communities use these tools if they don't have the right people there. And so we're sort of building out Llama DAO to help provide that expertise to people, as well as having the reporting product to help these DAOs manage their treasury.
Yeah, for me, when I first got involved in DAOs earlier this year, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of reporting, like financial reporting on DAO performance, and I met this through another DAO Discord that we're part of, and I finally found someone to jam with on all this finance, and that was really interesting, and there's a lot that I can contribute to the space, bringing my accounting background. And yeah, so simply because for me, I wanted to get involved because there's like the treasury reporting and the financial reporting doesn't exist right now for DAOs, or it's very limited. And I felt like, that's where I could contribute the most.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And it's super interesting to see how you guys' like respective backgrounds both kind of cross paths here on something a bit more niche in the space. I'm wondering, so Shreyas, when I have conversations with people about DAOs and specifically DAO treasuries, there's a tweet from you like a couple months back, I want to say. And you mentioned that, let me see if I can pull it. Here we go. So you said DAO treasuries are not hedge funds or venture funds. They're somewhere between corporate treasuries and university endowments. And you later clarified that this is specifically replying to protocol DAOs. But I'd be interested to see, just so we could lay the foundations for the rest of this conversation, if you had to define a DAO treasury to the audience, how would you guys each respectively do that?
I think I would describe it as this pool of assets that's managed by the community, as opposed to having another structure to manage these pool of assets. So it is a pool of money that I guess sits on an address that can be tracked by anyone as long as it's public. And the difference with a DAO treasury versus any other pool of assets in a corporation or another structure, maybe even a government, is there's a certain way that the community or token holders can decide what to do with those pool of assets, and that's what makes it unique in the sense that, one is they are crypto assets, but what makes it unique is there's a certain process that differs from other org structures, which is like if you want to get certain things done, I think one of the primary purposes of governance is to decide how the treasury is being spent, who gets it, how you pay core contributors, if you're doing a token swap, how the governance works on it. And so I think the treasury is actually probably one of the most essential parts of governance, because it's one of the, as you automate most parts of DAOs, the one thing that is very hard to automate around the edges is the treasury. And you see this even with DAOs that are, that have quite automated systems like Uniswap and Compound. The thing that's being voted on usually is how these treasuries are being spent. And that's where almost the public gets involved in those discussions. So to summarize, I would say pools managed by the community. And what these pools of assets, I think, constantly evolves, and probably even from that tweet, where I would still broadly agree that it's a DAO treasury is not a hedge fund, a venture fund, or venture fund, and it's closer to an endowment / corporate treasury. But I think even that doesn't fully capture it, because when these pool of assets are managed by a community of token holders, it just results in different things. Like you can do way more than you can versus an endowment pool of assets. Who knows what Uniswap's treasury ultimately does? Maybe as long as you use the discussion with the DeFi legal defense fund. I can't imagine any other pool of assets to even propose using that money for something like that. And so it's quite a unique thing to have the community so easily be able to vote on and propose what to do with these pool of assets. So it's going to be an evolving definition, because governance is yet to wake up to all the ways they can use these treasuries, and there'll be a bunch of experiments to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what Shreyas says. And on top of that, like this DAO treasury can be thought of as a means of ways to operate the DAO. And in a typical organization, you have a lot of top-down management. So people at the top have most say in how these treasuries or funds can be spent. And with community-owned organizations like Forefront, you have the model flips, right? So a lot of the community will have a lot of say in how this funds are spent. But along with that, it comes with a lot of responsibility in understanding the proposal and just gathering information and making decisions on which proposals are good and like the best ways to spend the treasury. And it'll be interesting to see what tools and what kind of information will be available to people in the future so they can make those informed decisions. So yeah, I think it's a great way for the community to be involved, managing these assets and also as a means of operating the DAO.
Awesome. I think a great way to structure this conversation, because pretty broad the way we titled it, and there's a lot that we could really dig into. I know, Kevin, you're specializing on the reporting side of things. I'd love to hear from you specifically what you think the importance is of reporting in DAO treasuries and what you think the most exciting things are on that front that you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. So the financial reporting is a very overlooked topic right now in DAO treasuries. And I think it's very important because it allows you to compare one period to another in terms of performance or in terms of what assets the DAO treasury has. For example, with an income statement is part of financial reporting. It's a financial statement that shows how much revenue a DAO is making in any period and the types of categories of expenses that they're spending and their net income. And why this is important is, one, it lets you compare one period to another, but it also lets you compare one DAO to another comparable DAO. For example, like a social token DAO to another one. And it's important for us as token holders to have that type of information. It's part of like a whole story that we can gather upon to make, like in the decisions on what kind of social token DAO that we want to pool our money into. And so, I think that's really important. And being part of Llama DAO, we're pretty much setting the precedence for a lot of the financial reporting that's done for DAOs today. And a lot of the challenge is that, not a lot of software, if any, is available. So I'm having to build a lot of these financial reporting tools from scratch using spreadsheets. And it's been a challenge, but, we're building a software, hopefully coming soon, that will make this a lot easier. And another big challenge is just like that the ecosystem doesn't have a lot of CPAs or accounting researchers right now that we can, bounce ideas off of. So, I've had a little bit over 8 years of financial reporting and accounting experience as a CPA, and I've met a lot. I feel like I'm like the only one who's really interested in this space. So hopefully in the future, we'll have more people contributing to financial reporting, because I think it's going to be very important for token holders in the future.
Like the phrasing that Kevin had of usefulness to token holders, like there's no point if you have transparency, like sort of technical transparency in the sense that you have these discussions on Discord and Discourse, you have these snapshot proposals or on-chain votes, and then you have Etherscan, and you could technically, if you're an investigative journalist, find out exactly what's happening in the treasury. But if you can't, if it's not useful, and if you think about DAO voter engagement, which is generally pretty low, and people hardly look through, these things in detail before engaging, you want the transparency to be as useful as possible. And, I'm glad I met Kevin actually through the FWB Discord. So it's a great, now that the case for Fortran, it's great to have these communities where you can meet people, because Kevin asked some really useful questions on reporting, and that's how we connected. But I think, overall it's only when transparency is useful that the token holders fully exercise their rights of like what they can do with the treasury, and that transparency basically doesn't exist, and it's most important for it to be for us to get the data where people are. So we actually built a Discord bot. One of the guys in our team, Harmandeep Singh, built this really cool bot that pulls up treasury data from the graphs, the subgraphs we deployed, and brings it to FWB's Discord, and we plan to deploy that elsewhere. And I think that's also one of the useful things is if people are hanging out on the Discord or hanging out on Twitter, like that's where you want data to be, instead of trying to push them to a space they aren't going yet. Second a lot of Kevin's thoughts.
Sick. Yeah. I was looking through some of the questions, and Shreyas and Kevin, you could check out the questions feed for some of the questions that were submitted for this conversation. And usually I would hold these for the end, but I think one of these questions is pretty relevant to the conversation we're having right now, and just sort of opened it up for a little bit more free discussion. But the first one from Danny is, what does the DAO Treasury Management stack look like? Proposal processing, voting tools, ways to earn yield, and hedge risk on idle funds. What else needs to be built? And we've talked a bit about this reporting software and reporting tech being built out, and how Kevin feels like a loner in this space right now. But I'm curious, what are the really large needs for treasury management that are still limiting from a technical perspective?
So if I again classify treasury management into asset allocation / borrowing, and then budgeting / spending, and then reporting, it's the third category. So on the asset allocation / borrowing, we don't have the templates yet of what good asset allocation looks like, and that's something we're actively trying to do as we work across DAOs. And so a lot of asset allocation, or some portion of asset allocation, can be quite customized to, the main goal when we engage with DAOs is what are the needs of the DAO or the protocol, and how can the treasury serve that, rather than viewing the treasury as this lone pool of assets that we're trying to grow in this investment sense. And so if you think about the goals of the protocol, the DAO, it might sort of differ across DAOs, and there might be customized things. But what's not customized maybe is every DAO needs to have some portion of assets in stablecoins, and that portion earning yield in a way that's sensible. Maybe some portion earning yield in these type of protocols, and then some portion earning yield in sort of lower risk protocols, and some portion earning no yield. And so I think that portion can be sort of standardized across projects, and you have groups like Index Scoop, Matt Graham from there, developing this stable yield index that could be useful for that. But basically, some products and services that make that stablecoin allocation just easy with a few clicks of a button. In a sense, how do you actually liquidate these assets, or how do you do, or use more complicated methods like an UMA synthetic option to diversify the stablecoins. That's one of the asset allocation. The other one on the asset allocation, I think, is to do with maybe token swaps, though that also may be a little customized. The other portion on the borrowing side is how do you, right now the treasuries basically borrow nothing, and that's fine. They already have a lot of assets. At some point, it makes sense to just at certain rates to have some asset borrowed. And there are a bunch of protocols out there, but ones that are suitable for depositing your governance token to borrow a certain amount at a certain yield. I think those, there are a few projects out there like Tropical building those up, but I think that's still like TBD. And I'd say on the spending side, of course, there's an importance for payments products. See on above here, Parcel is a great payments tool to batch transactions and make it much easier for DAOs to do payments. There's projects like Coordinate that make it easy for teams to decide, who should actually, these payments, like in a sense, attribution of work and payments based on that. But yeah, in payments too, there's sort of more to do there, where setting up recurring payments, doing payments in a way that is, operating vesting schedules and a bunch of things like that. And I could let Kevin answer the reporting side of things.
Yeah, so on the financial reporting front, obviously, the tools are needed to be built, but I also think there needs to be financial reporting standards across DAOs. So in traditional accounting, you have what's called the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and basically this is a group that I think it's about 6 or 7 people that come together each year, and they present all the rules that all these public companies have to play by. And in the future, I think this would be decentralized for where the community gets to decide what's the standard for DAOs to do financial reporting, across all DAOs, so that you can compare one DAO to another in terms of their financial statement. And one example of one thing that they could decide on is so in another social token DAO right now, there's talks about the Treasury buying an NFT on behalf of the community. And the question from a financial reporting standpoint is how do you value this on the statements? How do you value an art piece like an NFT? Do you value it on the statements at book value, which means the price that you buy it at, or fair market value, where you bring in an art evaluator and have them judge what the price is? So a lot of these things are still being figured out for DAO treasuries, whereas in traditional accounting, all these rules are already set. So that's a big part of the a treasury stack that needs to be built. But yeah, I think some of the tools today for general governance are pretty good. Snapshot, where you get to submit a proposal as a token holder and have other token holders vote on it. I think that's a really interesting tool that's being used today for governance, and I'm sure more will be built in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, I think if we have time towards the end, I might ask some more specific questions around borrowing, because I think at least from my readings and research in the space, it's definitely one of the more less talked about aspects of the 3 that you mentioned, Shreyas. But I'd like to kind of take the conversation at a bit more high level. So we've been talking about DAO treasuries more generally. And I'd like to dig into how these problems differ and how the principles of governance differ from a protocol DAO and how they manage their treasury versus a creator and curator DAO and how they manage their treasury. Are a lot of the problems and limitations that you guys are mentioning the same? And is there anything unique about a protocol versus a creator DAO in the problems you're mentioning?
Yeah, great question. I think there are similarities in the sense of having some stablecoins to pay critical expenses and to de-risk the treasury, and some, sort of maybe broader thoughts, I think, around inflows to generally exceed outflows of the treasury, like making sure that that the treasury like serves the DAO and grows it in different ways. But I think the things that are different. So one thing when Llama works with different DAOs, we try to stay relatively agnostic so far, because we think it's important to really learn the problems of DeFi protocols as well as create a curated DAOs. And one of the things is with DeFi protocols, the problems center more around asset allocation, at least now, and with create a curated DAOs, the problems center around budgeting / spending more, and both reporting is still an issue. So I would say that is one like difference in terms of priority of problems. I'd say the difference in terms of in the treasury itself is like, I think curated DAOs could use their treasuries in interesting ways. For example, you could actually recruit new creators to join your community by buying the NFT, and you can create this like vault of NFTs, which Whale has done, and you can curate this. It's almost it's an interesting way to both build the treasury up, like you're buying assets that you think are culturally significant, and you're getting people who are similarly aligned to your community. You can do things like distribute tokens to like certain tastemakers. Like if you think if you're just launching, or if the DAO is just launched its treasury and you want to actually maybe like get all the CryptoPunk holders to join the DAO, like you could just drop tokens to all these CryptoPunk holders, and that just brings an interesting community. There's a lot more focus on community, I think, earlier on with the curated DAOs, and so using the treasury to serve that is important. Sort of airdropping tokens to active Discord members, facilitating some type of like active tipping culture, which I've seen in the good and curated DAOs, because you're basically building this like community economy and helping people like build that trust and reliance on each other and culture of like generosity. I think swapping tokens with similarly aligned DAOs is really important. Like I think you want to start forming these these alliances and partnerships relatively soon. Like not as soon as you launch the token, but like within a year or so. Like try to find out similarly aligned groups and form these do some basic token swaps to have some type of engagement with different communities, because I think that's still like under today as a way to both like bootstrap like interest and growth, as well as like as just like having a partner and making sure you don't step on each other's toes, like making sure you can like crypto is like all about this like community collaboration. I think you see Yarn probably lead the way in this, where it's not just about the token swap, right? Like if you see Yarn, when people or Ready Capital had their hack, like Yarn devs just like step in and help that, and I think they do that out of they have good values and they do that, but it's also strategically really cool and helpful. Like it's you're basically buying the loyalty of other communities by helping out in that way. And so I think viewing collaborators more actively for curated DAOs is even more important maybe than like some of the DeFi protocols.
Yeah, just adding on to one point about budgeting, like the way we think about budgeting for these communities, that we want them to be as involved as much as possible. So with FWB, one of the line items we added to the budget is new community initiatives, which is a budgeted amount where people in the community could use up to put in their own proposals in the future. And the way we model this is based on Discord, right? Discord members, and what we're seeing is like if we have a model where we're projecting Discord member growth per month, and we're allocating budget based on that growth. So yeah, I think Discord community, Discord membership is a big part of our budgeting decision and how much people want to be involved in creating new initiatives. And I also want to touch on the point of collaboration between DAOs. I think that's a really unique aspect of DAOs compared to traditional organizations. And like Shreya says, I think it's very interesting what the relationship that Pickle and Urine had, and obviously Forefront and every like social token community.
Definitely. If you guys can speak to that a little bit more, it seems like something that is unique about DAOs and the existence of a treasury within a DAO is that it sort of blurs the lines between the collaboration and management of the treasury itself and the community collaboration with both like within the community and with other communities, right? Like had the treasury not existed and had the opportunity to maybe exchange tokens or to collectively vote on a proposal not existed, that same energy would not exist within the community, right? So what's I'm kind of rambling here, but how do you guys see the treasury playing into like specific community dynamics? And what opportunities does just simply the existence of a treasury create for a community that maybe a Web 2 or a non-DAO community might not have access to?
I think you hit on a really important word there, which is energy. Like, because I think the engagement in different DAOs really differs, and in certain DAOs you can sense like this energy on the governance forum, on Discord, and the energy is basically like we want to use the treasury assets in this way, not in that way. And the debate and there's active engagement. I have this like working theory that I don't know yet, but like I think basically we look at all the proposals and you see all the ones that have a margin of like 10% or less. Like the more proposals that have that margin, and more DAOs that have proposals that have that smaller vote margin, it's probably a good sign because it's a sign that one, community members feel they can make a proposal even if it is controversial. Like they didn't have to do all the lobbying and get through all the stakeholders and do all of that to confirm that 100% of people like this before they do it. Second, it means that people are actually reading the proposal, because if everyone's ratifying it, then it could be that no one's reading it because people just hit yes. And so in some ways, like anecdotally seen this with a few DAOs that when you have that sort of energy in there, like it's a good sign. And so anytime there's that like that sort of feeling that people do feel empowered to make a proposal to use the treasury in this way, especially when they're outside the core team, and especially when they're sort of the quote unquote like little guy, like they're not a large stakeholder network, they're not well connected or anything, and they're still making that proposal like that. Those are the bottom-up communities that you really want to. One, those are communities you want to create, and you want to do whatever it takes to create those types of communities. And when you see communities like that, those are the good ones. And I could say Yarn, maybe Index Coop. Those are a few that I've seen that have that sort of bottom-up driven energy. But it is it's a decision. Like I think it's a cultural like thing that more people have to get used to, and it's better honestly happening sooner than later. Like I think people people underestimate how easy progressive decentralization is. It's easy actually if you don't progressively decentralize, if you just decentralize like as quick as possible. I mean it in terms of the community aspect. Like if you're trying to get bottom up involvement from the community, it's better to work in public sooner, to have your development roadmap like out there sooner for people to question and debate. It's better for people to propose how things should go with your treasury sooner than you think. Like in the sense, of course, you need some initial core contributors and some type of like product market or community market fit. But beyond that, like I think drive this like bottom up contribution sooner than later, because we still don't know what tokens are. Like it's not like discounted value future cash flows. There's something else going on, and I suspect that thing has got to do with the with the community, and like community ultimately is one of the only modes, I think, because when you have community plus ecosystem development, because when the code is forkable and open source, like what's one of the key things, of course, like product is extremely important. The products is like the route to community and is the route to ecosystem development, which is like all these integrations around the product or the protocol, all the dependencies, all the ways that the whole world is wired around the protocol. That is community plus ecodev. So yeah, I mean that's how I think the treasury and the community are closely linked. Like if there's more initiative to fight almost to use the treasury in certain ways, then those are the communities I'd bet on.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the relationship between communities and treasuries, because as a token holder, I'm not a token holder just in one DAO or one community. Like I'm a stakeholder in multiple, right? So I'm constantly reviewing proposals across multiple organizations and voting on them. I think that's a really unique aspect. And it goes to what Shreyas says about like bottom up kind of like proposal management in this space compared to like Web 2. And yeah, I think there's a lot of synergy between different organizations in the space that we work in compared to a more competitive one in traditional companies. So yeah, those are just really interesting aspects, and will be cool to see how that plays out in the future.
For sure. Yeah, I think this idea of and Kevin, you kind of just hit on this right now, but this idea of being a citizen across DAOs, and not just like you could view this from the perspective of the DAO itself, and how the community goes about managing itself and managing the treasury, etc. You could also view this from the individual level and how an individual manages themselves amongst the variety of DAOs that they're a part of, right? And I think a lot of these questions go hand in hand. But the various dynamics and the angle at which you look at it could definitely lead to some really interesting conversations. So definitely something I'll be thinking about. I want to dig into some of these like community source questions, because some of these are absolutely awesome. The first is from Pure Mood. So they asked, should entire DAOs be given free reign over treasuries, or is there a benefit to entrusting treasury wallet actions to a smaller subset of individuals? Shreyas, I know if I'm remembering correctly in a post, I believe for Bankless, you mentioned this idea of like decentralized treasury spending and used Pioneer and Right Race as examples. I'm wondering, that's probably relevant to this question here, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I think the idea came from the grant committees that are formed, especially with Aave, Compound, and Uniswap. And I'm leading Aave Grants DAO, and we have a budget of $1 million a quarter for 2 quarters of a pilot program. And I've been thinking very actively on how do you decentralize this, because I think for the long term you don't want to have a committee of 8 people deciding treasury spending. Of course, like it's still accountable to governance. It's still like governance can easily disband in this committee and this multi-sig. But even then, like if you want to think, even if you do a very good job, right? Like what ideally, like my vision for this is like the grants program is a pathway to build this whole like organization around the DAO, and the organization, quote unquote, like may look very different. Like it's probably this like liquid, loose bunch of contributors. Some of them are permanent, some of them are DAOs and sub-DAOs that work for Aave. And some of them are, just these loose contributors who, just like Kevin said, people who live across different DAOs. Like there will be people who can just, do open source work across different DAOs and make a living. And so to see that, like what you want to decentralize is the power for more contributors and more subgroups to make treasury spending decisions. So, if the grant committee gets that money from the Aave Treasury, and Aave Treasury allocates that across a bunch of contributors, there should be some power for, let's say, like, we're probably going to have a risk DAO set up within Aave that deals with asset listings and some legal and risk analysis. Now, that group should, after they built up some reputation, should have agency and power to allocate certain treasury assets within what they see fit within the risk mandate. So, if they want to hire Gauntlet, or if they want to recruit someone to join the risk DAO, if they want to do XYZ things that fall broadly within risk mandate, they should be able to do it, and more such groups should be able to do that. So the grants is almost a way to seed these groups, and then you have dozens of these groups or individuals who have built some sort of reputation in the broader DAO network, who now have treasury spending power, which is interesting. Like if you think of voting power, right? Like voting power is accruing to, at least as it stands now, to investors in the network and maybe sort of quote unquote protocol politicians who have investors delegate those votes, but it's primarily investors. But I think treasury spending power should get allocated to contributors. So the more people who contribute and build this reputation in the network should have more power to decide spending. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to sit and like review grant applications. What I mean is that they just have some say, and the process was still TBD. The models, the comp says were like Pioneer and Right Race as a way for voting to be done. I think it maybe it doesn't resemble that. It could be something else. But basically, some way for individuals and group and these sub DAOs to have power to allocate like X amount of the treasury based on the reputation they built up for the DAO. And I think that'd be sort of really cool to build up, because then it's a way to form this ecosystem around the protocol that in a way that's very different from a traditional org structure where you're trying to hire like a VP of sales or something. And so it's a different way to form the org, and it's a different way to like allocate spending power. So yeah, excited to see that play through, and there's probably going to be like revisions to how this plays out.
Yeah, from a budgeting standpoint, definitely agree with Shreyas. We're playing around with the idea of budgeting for allowing the community to vote on budgets or spending and delegate spending power to certain individuals, or just having line item spending power for different expenses categories. So whether it's engineering or software administrative expenses and so on. I think for DAOs with simpler operations, it's okay to have that line item category type of budgeting process. When you have a more complicated business model for a DAO, you might want to have that spending power allocated to either more influential members of that community, or people with the type of expertise to handle that spending.
For sure. Thanks, y'all. I move to the second question real quick. I know we're running low on time, so hopefully we get as many of these as possible. Next one is, in a recent post in the Bankless newsletter, Shreyas discussed the possibility of composable NFTs being used to own a treasury assets. What are some ways this could change the way M&As are approached by DAOs?
Yeah, I think the idea actually was suggested by Brian Flynn, and the idea is that an NFT can hold assets, and so if you want to think of how an M&A can be done, maybe it's done by bidding on these NFTs that hold these underlying assets that are basically the treasury assets of the DAO, and possibly you need to pay up more than that. You need to pay some premium, and so you have some people, you have a group, maybe some M&A advisory that evaluates what the value of these intangible assets are, and how much you can bid on the NFT for, like what type of premium you need to pay on top of the existing assets, and the best way to finance it. Should you have debt or tokens or stable coins, and how do you actually negotiate with governance, all of that. Having said that, I don't think like traditional M&A will be as common as it is in corporations. I think what you'll see much more of is collaborations. I think you'll have some earlier stage acquisitions. So, for example, for a protocol, if there are other protocols that if there are clones of some of the DeFi protocols on other chains, and the clones are like very early stage clones, then maybe the way you get back value to the protocol is by acquiring them earlier stage. It sort of almost resembles an early stage investment. But then in terms of like more traditional like mergers of equals, or like $100 million plus type treasury or assets, like I think those will be like you'd see much more collaboration, in the sense you have it starts out with a token swap, or it has some like if a DEX wants to get into lending, then and it doesn't have the resources to internal resources to allocate to building a lending protocol, then what it can do is like agree with the lending protocol to exchange some fee revenue to the treasury of each other, and maybe have some mechanism for rage quitting if the communities are not happy, and have some integrations in place. I think the problem with traditional M&A in the DAO context is that the code is open source and portable. What are you actually acquiring? And what you're trying to acquire is the community and all the integrations and the ecosystem development. But you can't just do that by force. Like you actually need to buy in from the community to do all of that, right? And so the way you actually do what might seem like an M&A at the end, in terms of the end result, is by actually to the root of collaboration. Is you actually need to help out these other communities. You need to do these token swaps. You need to do all these things that might eventually lead to those integrations and have that ecosystem development that both of you enjoy those synergies of that you wouldn't if you just operate independently. But I don't think it happens as often as with I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think traditional M&A will happen as much as these type of like web native M&A, which we're still like determining what that looks like. I think token swaps are like a V1 of that.
So with the traditional M&A, you'd have to combine a lot of like the financial statements, for example, and a lot of the technical isn't there for M&A right now in the Web3 space. So from a technical standpoint, it's going to be very difficult to value, for example, one community and the other, and seeing their combined value. And like Shreyas says, like a lot of these protocols or projects are open source, and so what are you really acquiring when you do an M&A? Those are very interesting things to think about.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective, because I think for me, like the concept of an M&A just sounds so natural, particularly like in the context of corporations. So I'd never actually thought about the question of like what exactly are you acquiring, right? So interesting stuff there. I think this might be the last question, and then if we have time at the very, very end, we might let one or two people to stage, but want to make sure we're being conscious of people's time. Last question is, what do you believe will likely be the biggest mistake DAO treasury managers will make when preparing for the next crypto bear market? Whoever, Shreyas or Kevin, whoever wants to take that one first.
Yeah, I think one of the things that treasuries can make a mistake on during bear markets is not absorbing all the available. And this is not just like the financials, but also understanding the project and understanding the different type of governance proposals being sent out. So having full picture instead of just reading, bear market news is something that treasuries need to do in order to act upon, not on logic, not just emotion. And I think that's important. So summarizing, just gathering a lot of the information to make informed decisions during bear markets.
Yeah, in addition, I just say, just having the treasury need to have enough assets to power critical expenses and ideally ramp up expenses during a market. And so what you need to do to be in a position to do that is you need to have enough stablecoins in your treasury so that you can still pay critical expenses even if your native token is down 50%, and you can ideally ramp up expenses. Like, you want to have a competitive edge, you should be able to increase sort of marketing growth rate expenses, increase, if your protocol, increase incentives for liquidity mining at a time when no one else can, or you want to acquire, you want to do token buybacks, or you want to acquire some other piece of asset that you couldn't before. Basically, you want to be positioned where you can do all those things, and the way you do that is by having some stablecoins or some uncorrelated assets in your treasury. It doesn't need to be too much, but just sufficient so you're in a position to act from strength in a bear market instead of be positioned like probably every other treasury and have to cut down expenses and all of that.
Awesome. I think we have time for one question off of from the audience right now. So if people want to raise their hand to come to stage, that would be great. I'll give it a minute or a few seconds. There we go. Cool.
Hey guys, I have a quick question on DAO management for a project that's still pre-launch, so don't have any funds under management. Are there any, tools or processes you would recommend looking into to kind of get off on the right foot?
Yeah, I just say in terms of the treasury, just keep it simple, I guess. Have a data gnosis. I would say I wouldn't any focus on the distribution of the token, and after you create after you distribute it to your community, maybe later you can think about make sure there's sufficient liquidity for the token by incentivizing the community. But I honestly wouldn't worry about a lot of the things that we've been discussing at that earlier stage. It's more about getting the community and everything else in place, and slowly you can start building out the systems, starting with Gnosis and then Snapshot and a few other things.
Gotcha. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And Jax will be writing up our tweet thread after this. So appreciate you. Thank you for the question. I think we can wrap it up there, y'all. Thank you again to Shreyas and Kevin for coming through. I learned a ton in this conversation. I'm sure plenty of others did. Anything you guys want to close off with?
Thanks for having us. This was a really good set of questions. You're a good host, and I think excited. We want to say excited for what Fortran is doing. I think Carlos is amazing, and you guys are kind of at the helm of creator curated DAOs and social tokens, and it's so early in terms of what these things can do. And I'm personally excited about the treasury and the governance aspect of them, because it could be the most creative, right? Like, this is an open canvas in terms of what any of these organizations can do. And so excited to collaborate more and see what you guys are building.
Yeah, thanks again for inviting us. It's exciting to be at the very beginning of Treasury reporting and management. So yeah, this is really exciting to do this talk. And I posted some screenshots, or you posted some screenshots in voice text, just for people to look at some of the statements that we're building. But other than that, yeah, thanks everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that too. For those who want to go look at those, I pinned the messages in voice text, so you can scroll up or just look at the pinned message. We'll probably just leave them there pinned, and they'll be there for a while, but we'll leave them pinned for at least the next week, so people can easily go check that out to the next Hangout. So thank you guys. Thank everybody for coming out, and hopefully we'll see you guys at the next Hangout.